Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, Math Made Easy with Terry in 10 minutes. So we're going to be talking about the quadratic inequality graphing. Is that okay? Please, like I always say, make sure you review the previous videos because for each videos I keep going to is built on the knowledge already discussed earlier. All right. So it's very important that you try as much as possible to review previous video before going to the next one. Also, if you've not subscribed, I don't know what you're waiting for. Click on the subscription button and the notification bell so that when I post new videos, you'll be the first person to know. Now, also, it's very important for this that you try as much as possible to review the way of sketching a quadratic graph because it's almost similar, almost exactly similar with just 1 or 2 steps extra in sketching a quadratic graph. So just to remind you, I told you in the quadratic equation is a is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c. If you remember this, so this is normal quadratic equation. But because we're talking about quadratic inequalities, it's going to be something like y is greater than ax squared plus bx plus c, or you could see y is less than ax squared plus bx plus c, or it could be greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. So it could be any of this. And this is going to be in this form to represent the region of the plane that will be bounded by the parabola or the graph. And also, I told you what we talked about, that how do you sketch a graph? I told you the first thing you need to find is the shape. There are 5 important things. You need to find the shape. You need to find the size. We talked about this. We also need to find the x-intercepts. So in that video, we talked about the concept of x-intercepts or the roots. And I told you that how do you find the roots is that you have to then use any of the method. You can use factorization. Okay, you can use factorization. You can use a formula method, or you can use completing the square method. We talked about this. So you can use the complete the square method. So I showed you how to use each and every one of them. Then also for the factorization, I showed you that we can also use the difference of 2 squares. So you can use difference of 2 squares. Okay. Then either that, you can also use common factors. I also explained that. You can use common factors to factorize. You can also use trinomials, a equal to 1. And also you can use trinomials when a is not equal to 1. Okay, so you can use any of this to solve this. And also when graphing as well, I also told you that if y is greater than 0, you're going to shade above the line, if you remember, for graphing quadratic inequalities. So, and if it's below the line, you're going to shade, if it's less than 0, you're going to shade below the line, okay? So it's exactly the same thing, but exact principle will apply here. So, okay, so above the line, if it's greater than 0, so it's above the x-axis. And if it's less than 0, it's going to be below the x-axis. So it's very important to keep this in mind. So when you want to graph, there's something to keep in mind. If the equation is y is greater than 0, that means the solution is going to be above the x-axis. Okay. Same thing with greater than or equal to. And if it's less than 0, it's going to be below the x-axis. Same thing with less than or equal to as well. Is that all right? So for example, if it would be, we have y is greater than 3x squared plus 4x minus 5. In this case now, the solution is going to be above the x-axis when you draw it. If, for instance, you have y is less than or equal to x squared minus 9, in this case, the solution is going to be below the x-axis. Is that okay? Okay, so that is how you solve this kind of questions, all right? Now let's get started now. All right, so let me talk about the rules and how to do it. How do you solve this? Now there are 5 rules for this. So the first thing is that you have to then rearrange the equation with all the variables on the left-hand side and everything else on the right-hand side. So you then have to what? Rearrange the equation with all variables on the left-hand side and everything else on the right-hand side. Okay? When you're done, number 2 is that you then have to then sketch the resulting quadratic what? Equation. Ignoring the inequality sign. Okay? So usually, in order to do this, you use all the rules we already discussed in the previous video. Is that okay? So using all the rules discussed in the previous video. Then number 3, now if the inequality sign is greater than or equal to or greater than in step 1, okay? So now how do you shade? So if the inequality sign is greater than or equal to or greater than in step 1, okay? So in that case, you shade the parabola, okay, above the x-axis. So any part of the graph above the x-axis, you shade it. And when you shade it, then you then have to note all the regions. Then note all regions of x that satisfy that region of parabola. Number 4, if the inequality sign is less than or equal to or less than in step 1, then in this case, you then have to shade the parabola below, okay? This time you have to shade below the what? The x-axis. And as usual, you then have to note, okay? Then you have to note as well, all regions of x that satisfy that region of parabola. Okay, so it will have to satisfy that region of what? Parabola. Okay, then number 5, when you're done with all this, you then have to then what? Write down the range of values that satisfy the inequalities. Okay, so the first thing, you have to rearrange the equation with all the variables on one side and everything else on the other side. You then have to sketch, ignore the inequality sign, like you sketch it as normal, like we talked about. You talk about the shape, the size, the x-intercept, the y-intercept, and the vertex, okay? So you talk about that. Then, yes, is the end of the method. Oh, I didn't finish this one up. So number 4, you use the y-intercept, okay? The things to sketch a graph. And number 5, you use the what? The vertex. Okay, so the vertex, you can either use the formula, okay? I taught you that formula, or you can use the complete the square method. Okay, so you can use complete the square method. And also for the complete the square, you can also use the formula, okay? Or you can use when a is equal to 1 method. So it's a method when a is equal to 1. Another method when a is not equal to what? 1. And like I told you, for y-intercept, what happens at y-intercept? X is equal to 0, and x-intercept, y is equal to 0. Then the shape, I gave you when a is greater than 0, and when a is less than 0. And also for the size, I also told you the effect of when a is big, when the absolute value of a is bigger. And also I also talked about when the absolute value of a is what? Smaller. So we talked about all this, okay? We talked about all this in the previous video. So we're gonna pick an example now for this to explain how do you sketch a quadratic inequality what? So let's pick an example, okay? Let's pick an example. So let's say we're told to find the values of x that satisfy f of x is greater or equal to 0, okay? Where f of x is equal to x squared minus 7x plus 10. So we're told to find the values for that. So technically, you can write it out, but usually the best way to do this is to sketch the inequality. All right, so let's start. Rearrange the equation with all the variables on the left-hand side and everything else on the right-hand side. So let's start. Step 1. So we're going to have, sorry, not this place. So we're going to have, yes, step 1. So we have x squared minus 7x plus 10, okay? Now we're told that this f of x is greater or equal to what? 0. Is that okay? So now we already have this. Step 2 is that we're told now to sketch the resulting quadratic equation, ignoring the inequality sign. So what I'm saying is that assuming that this was an x squared minus 7x is plus 10 is equal to 0, how would you have sketched it? Okay, so what I will have done, the first thing I have to do is I have to find the roots. Okay, and I've shown you how to find the roots in the previous video. You can use any method, the formula method, you can use complete the square method, and you'll find that the root is 2 and 5, okay? I'm not gonna go straight into this. Then you also find the y-intercept. At y-intercept, x is equal to 0. So you see that the y-intercept for this as well, when you check the video for y-intercept, you see that it will be equal to 10. Then also the vertex. We've talked about the vertex before. So go and look at the video on vertex. When you look at the vertex, you'll find that the vertex is 7/2 and minus 9/4. All right. So now we can now sketch the graph. So when you sketch the graph for this, we're going to have something like this. Something like this. Okay. Then the roots, we have the roots to be what? The roots is 2 and 5. So let's assume here is 2 and here is what? 5. Now, because our A is greater than 0, so that means we're going to have a U shape, okay? So I talked about it earlier as well. Then the y-intercept is at 10. So let's assume here is 10. And the vertex is at 7/2 minus 9/4. So let's assume this point is the 7/2. This is 7/2 and 9/4. Okay. So 7/2 and minus this. Let's assume this is minus 9/4. So that means this is 7/2. X is 7/2 and y is minus 9/4. Then you remember you have to draw a smooth curve coming down through this, through that, okay, all the way back up. All right. So this is it. This is the graph for this. But we now have to go to step 3. Okay. Step 3 now, we have to look at step 3. Step 3 said, if the inequality sign is a greater than or equal to, or greater than, so if you look at this, for instance, this is also a what? A greater than, okay? Then we can now have what? You have to shade the parabola above the x-axis. So that means we have to come to this parabola. So we're going to shade the one above. This is the x-axis. So the solution is going to be on this line here. Are you seeing it? It's going to be on this line. So because it's on this line, so that means any point, any x-axis that is related to this line will also be a what? The solution. Are you seeing it? So any x-axis that is related to this line above is going to be also what? A solution. So that means you will notice that it's going to be everything above 5, that's a solution, and everything that is below 2, that is a what? Solution. So we can now say step 5, which is where we're meant to talk about it. The x is going to be what? Less than or equal to 2 also, and x is going to be greater than or equal to 5. Okay? But if this part, for instance, let's assume this was greater than, let's assume it was greater than. The answer now will also be x is less than 2 and x is greater than what? 5. So exactly the same thing. The exact inequalities is what you also repeat in the answer. Is that okay? All right. So let me pick one more question. All right. Let me pick one more question on this. So let's say we have this example here. So example 2. Okay, we're told find the values of x, all right? Find the values of x that satisfy, okay? That satisfy f of x is less than or equal to what? 0, where okay, f of x is equal to x squared minus 7x plus 10. So now we're going to solve exactly the same question, all right? But instead of us having greater than, we're going to be having what? less than. Is that right? So let us see how it will be. So step 1 is going to be exactly the same thing. We're going to have x squared minus 7x plus 10 is less than or equal to 0. Step 2, as expected, we're going to have the roots to be the same thing, to be 2 and 5. So we're having the roots, which is the x-intercept, to be equal to what? 2 and 5. Okay? When you solve it, the y-intercept is going to be equal to 10. Then the vertex, okay, is going to be equal to 7/2 and minus 9/4. So please go back and watch my previous video on this. That is that. Then we're going to draw the graph for this. All right. So draw the graph for this. Okay. So we're going to have the points here. We have the points. So we have 2 and 5. So let's assume this is 2 and this is 5. Remember, we're sketching. So this is 10. Okay, let's assume this is 10, the y-intercept. And also, let's assume this is the minus 9/4. Okay, so somewhere here. So that means this point is 7/2. Okay, and what? Minus 9/4. All right. So we have this now. We'll draw this line all the way like this. So remember, it has to be one smooth line joining the curve all the way back. Okay. So please go back and watch the video on how to sketch. All right. Then, but in this case now, we're told that we are looking at what? Less than. So they say if it's less than or equal to, what do? You shade the parabola below the x-axis. So we're going to go back now. So instead of shading the last one, we shaded above, the line above. Now we're going to shade the line below. So the line below is this part here. Are you seeing it? The line below is this part here. So that means because this is the line below, so any x-axis that is related to this line below is part of the what? Is part of the solution for this. So that means you will notice that it is numbers that are greater than 2 and also that are less than what? 5. So that means step 5, okay? Step 5, I can now write that the answer for this is x is greater than what? Equal to 2, and also x is less than or equal to what? 5. So that means I can write this together to be x greater or equal to 2. Remember, I said if you swap the sign, and x is also greater or equal to 5. So, but if the question, for instance, was, let's say the question was less than, okay? If the question was less than, it's going to be the same thing. X is greater than 2, and x is less than 5. So that means it's going to be 2 is less than x less than 5. All right? So that's how you do it. So it's very important you know how to graph. I've talked about that. So I'm just applying the principle here. The only difference is that when you have greater than, it's above the x-axis. When you have less than, it's below. So this is the most important thing to keep in mind. When you're solving greater than, okay, it's above the x-axis. Less than or equal to is always below the x-axis. And try to review, okay, how to draw a quadratic equation graph. So you have to first find the shape, the size, the x-intercept or the root, the y-intercept, the vertex, and I gave you several ways of solving that. Okay, so I'm going to see you in the next video where we're going to solve now quadratic inequalities. How do we solve those questions? And like I said, if you've not subscribed, I don't know what you're waiting for, so subscribe. Click on the notification bell so when I post new videos, you'll be the first person to know. All right, I'm going to see you in the next video where we talk about how do we solve quadratic inequalities.